You know, I really hate people who claim to be underdogs. I love people who are actually underdogs, people who are being oppressed by the society around them. However, there's a strange recurring trend around the internet that the people around the world that being an underdog is the most amazing thing to be. And what better way of becoming an underdog than to have your identity be the most marginalized person imaginable? People like this have strange victim complexes. They strive on becoming the victim of the system by deliberately putting themselves in it instead of genuinely being one, all for attention and love from many. And the amount of frequency of these people pretending to be the victim role is so staggering, it's now beginning to cover up people who actually suffer from genuine struggle because everybody's attention is now focused on someone who claims to be oppressed instead of someone who genuinely is oppressed. And with that comes this article.
Persona 5 can't champion marginalized underdogs without queer characters.
As we move forward to this article, we need to keep the mindset that this article is written by someone who wants to be looked as a victim of the system, even though they're not. You're writing in Waypoint, the branch of Vice magazine, and is one of the biggest journalistic outlets out there. So why would you take the role of the underdog when you are anything but? You are being accepted into society, and if you're begging society to accept you more than what you already are, I think we can all see who's the entitled person in the room here.
When marginalized outsiders come together, they can confront their powerful, privileged antagonists and change society for the better. At least, that's the point that Persona 5 is trying to make. These non-conformist high school outsiders, known as the Phantom Thieves, strike back against the shitty people in power, get justice against abusers, and change the world. But just how representative of marginalized youth and teenage outcasts can Persona 5 really be when the cast excludes queer characters altogether? It's an erasure that's difficult to reconcile with the game's ostensibly empowering, contemporary message.
Well, they're not supposed to represent queer characters because it's representative of Japan, not the West. How are you not able to distinguish between the two cultures is way beyond my understanding.
Persona 5 takes place in a sleek, semi-imagined Tokyo of the year 20XX, where the protagonist has to come to live out to his probation after being charged for assault. Once he's thrust into a new life as a juvenile delinquent, every adult around him, from his new guardian to school officials, remind him of his charges. The constant mistreatment and reminders of the crime he didn't commit places him on the fringes of his new city.
Before we go in even further, just a small note, the game does make the year ambiguous, but if you're observant enough, you might notice that the game actually takes place in 2016. April 15th of the game is Friday, 2016's April 15th is also Friday, June 5th is also Sunday in the game, and also Sunday in 2016. Rise, a character in Persona 4 whose posters appear almost everywhere and you can even bring one at home, is said to be around 20 or 21 years old. Persona 4 takes place in 2011, and during that time, Rise was in her first year in high school, which means she should be around 15 or 16. So there you go. Game takes place in 2016. Don't know why Atlas needs to make it so ambiguous.
As the game goes on, the outsider perspective becomes less of a core theme and increasingly becomes window dressing. While these characters may feel rejected, their outsider status doesn't always hold up under examination. Honor student Makoto Nijima and corporate heiress Haru Okumura may feel out of place in the world around them, but when it comes to being an outsider, their fundamentally privileged and secure positions don't give them the first idea of what it means to be really isolated and out of place.
Again, I don't buy someone who writes in a big journalistic outlet the position of an underdog to judge whether or not characters are underdogs. It's also a little dishonest to say that Haru and Makoto aren't underdogs because they have a privileged status. Makoto, she's sure as hell rich, but the thing is, she's a yes girl whose entire character arc revolves in her rebelling against the system, one that she is stuck with because of her position of authority as the school president, and one that caused her to become despised by the main characters because she's just obeying the orders that the school authorities say, to the point where An accused her of covering up Kamoshida's crimes. Haru, on the other hand, well, she's rich and privileged, but none of those are relevant when you're being forced into a political marriage with a jackass. And if you follow the social links for each respective characters, they will reveal in what ways they're out of place and isolated in the society. In fact, Makoto's entire social link revolves around her learning about the world beyond than just the books she read. Maybe I should advise Waypoint to have a writer who actually played the game.
The Phantom Thieves are framed as outcasts, but in an idealized way. They're marginalized the way the kids in the Breakfast Club are marginalized. They may all be in their respective fringes, but they also have places they belong. The Phantom Thieves become heroes around the world when they take down harmful hackers and business CEOs. And even when the public turns against them, they have heroic comebacks that push them into the limelight again. They act the part of the outsiders, but the world loves them. People look up to them, and their outsider identities never really harm them past the beginning of the game.
Well, I do agree that the moment the characters become phantom thieves, their individual struggles feel a lot less relevant, but why should they be on the main story? The main story is about the phantom thieves, not the characters themselves. If you want to go in depth to the character's struggle, there's the social links or confidants when you can progress the journey of these characters even further, and know more about them in detail and their other struggles, including their past and their inner demons that they have to overcome. They are all incredibly interesting and highly recommended to max out for great rewards. Even side characters that have their own social links have great interesting underdog stories of their own. Hell, what you're saying here reminds me a lot of Mishima's social link, where it's him basically trying to clinch on the Phantom Thieves' popularity and spotlight without knowing why they gained the spotlight in the first place. Same goes for you guys. You guys need to learn that just because you put yourself in the spotlight as a marginalized person doesn't mean that people would buy it. The reason why people love Phantom Thieves is not because they're popular, but because they help people, and the characters are genuinely underdogs. A lesson learned from Mishima's social link. I don't know if you're the sort of person who don't max out social links, but it's highly recommended that you do so. You'll miss a lot of stories if you don't.
Queer youth are seldom as lucky as the Phantom Thieves. In many cases, they don't have safe spaces to return at the end of the day, let alone unconditional love and acceptance. The Phantom Thieves all have safety to fall back on in their daily lives when they aren't changing the world, places to go, family to return home to, or complete acceptance from their loved ones. These are things that not all queer people, especially queer youth, know the comfort of.
I know this might sound harsh, but who freaking cares? Who cares about the issues of queers in the Western world? Compared to where I am right now, you guys are in the safest place in this entire world. The West is by far the most accepting with queers, and that proof can be seen with you writing this article in a big journalistic outlet. The reason why you're saying that you're oppressed is you're claiming victim bucks, and that is addicting to you. That feels satisfying for you.
This isn't me asking for queer characters who are heard throughout the story, but for meaningful queer representation in a game with a modern setting and themes.
And that promise is thrown completely off the window.
After all, real-world Japan is currently struggling with acceptance for queer youth. Just this spring, Japan's education ministry revised their basic policy.
And here's how Japan is oppressive to queer people. It's completely irrelevant in this discussion. Like, you're using the Phantom Thieves as a way to shove in your political agenda. A lot of these gaming websites are now mouthpieces for political agendas that even Japanese video games are now being used for it. But we're unfortunately not done with this article. More people claiming to be underdogs here, guys.
Then there's Persona 5's almost fanatically heteronormative worldview. The protagonist has a choice of 9 romance options, 4 party members, and 5 other characters he meets across Tokyo over his year living there. All those romance options are heterosexual. He has the option to date his teacher, but not his best friend Ryuji, who has been here for him since his first day of classes just because he's a guy.
Well, there you go. Heteronormative, in your opinion, is thrown completely off the window. Anybody who uses the word heteronormative is on the mindset that being heterosexual is not a normal thing to be, and living in a heterosexual world is freaking bad. I don't know if these people are suffering from brainwash or confused.
Late into Ryuji's social link, he even tells him, I guess being free is like, it's like how I feel when I'm talking to you, man, as a way of expressing his closeness with the protagonist. But no matter how close the game may push them together, the two remain just friends.
I can imagine the writer going like this. Yes, they're friends. Your ship is not canon, freaking deal with it, like the rest of us. And you know, there are also other people that you can remain just friends with. The other 8 romanceable female social links other than the ones you romanced. And even then, if you romance everybody, there's a big consequence. Also, Ryuji is an option in the Valentine's Day, just in case you missed it.
This heterosexual outlook pervades a game and series that prides itself in genuine love and caring relationship between young people. Where we see these romances, we see romances that are idealized, just like how the characters in the game are. What does Atlas present as the only ideal for their supposed outsiders? Straight relationships.
God, look, I want to accept people on the LGBT as well. But the moment these people say that being heterosexual is problematic, I begin to feel someone is brainwashing these people to think this way, and that person needs to be stopped, otherwise would probably have some form of a mass genocide to every heterosexual ever.
Even worse, like previous games in the series, Persona 5 has no problem dipping its toes into queerphobia if the game thinks it can get a cheap joke in it. During the game's first visit to Shinjuku, 2 older gay men quickly make advances on Ryuji and talk about who should be with him. When the Phantom Thieves go out to the beach, Ryuji is hit on by the same men and chased away, as if a laugh track is to be played after.
Those scenes are hilarious. Those scenes do not mean that Atlas hates gay people, for God's sake. If that's your interpretation, you have an issue.
At this point, it's very clear that the outsiders that Persona 5 props up as heroes are all idealized rebels and nothing more. Queer people are on the outside too, but are represented as predatory and hypersexual at every point they appear. Queer folk in this fictionalized Tokyo are forced to the fringes, the only place the society is deemed appropriate, unlike the phantom thieves who stay there to steal treasures.
OMG, think of the queers. Like,
We can look at this representation and an Atlas track record of queer and transphobia in the past Persona series games and see why they chose to include queer characters in the group, or even as characters to be helped. Persona's care for the marginalized never quite feels sincere.
Yes, they linked that article from 2012 saying Atlas needs to stop its transphobia. That article was stupid back then and it was stupid right now. No, Atlas is not transphobic. Just because they have scenes making fun of characters who are queer doesn't mean they hate gay people. And by the way, Naoto and Kenji are not good enough according to that article. And honestly, when are we going to make it enough? It's never enough for these people. There's never a point in which these people are satisfied. There's never a point in which these people are not offended.
Part of what gives people courage to keep going is having their struggles and experiences reflected in their stories they see, to see heroes whose journeys resemble their own, told from a point of view of understanding, acceptance, and respect. I like Persona 5, Hashino and Atlas made a great game, but they did not do their jobs here.
They did not do their jobs on representing queer people because that's not what their jobs are. You think that that's what their jobs are, but it really isn't. You're someone who is selfish and wants their issues to be noticed by Atlas Senpai, but Atlas Senpai is not going to notice you to do that. They won't notice the thousands of players begging for PS4 ports of Persona 4 Golden, let alone PC ports of all the Persona games. Why would you expect they would notice you just because you write for a big journalistic outlet? Yeah, just because you write for a big journalistic outlet. Unfortunately, since these journalists have power in these outlets, they're gonna write whatever ideological garbage they can have and create pressure for the Japanese game developers to do things their way. It's time for this to stop. This article is cancer among many others, and the best way for us is to make sure that nobody fell for it and people debunk it. People are starting to left and right becoming crazier and crazier thanks to articles like these, and it gets more dangerous knowing that these people have reach. Hopefully nobody fell for this garbage, but that is incredibly unlikely. That's all for the video today. If you like this, you can go ahead, click like button, and subscribe for more. If you wish, you can support me on Patreon. Thanks for watching.